And since we're talking anyways, my dear Steve, can you tell me something about the ayahuasca plant that you told me yesterday? How do you find it? When do you know that it's right? How do you determine if it's right with the bark? And that's like bitter.
Yeah. It's only what I was told.
Yeah.
At the temple, the shaman took us into the selva with the group, and he explained that the ayahuasca vine has to be at least 7 years old before it can be used in an ayahuasca brew, so it has to be mature to a degree. And he scraped the outside of the bark, and he said they can have different colours, like up to 4 different colours, like there's a yellow and a brown and something else, maybe pink. And sometimes the amount of bark that's in the mix will make it bitter as well. And this is where also the chacruna can change the mix, because you've probably experienced it here. This one is a visual mix, I think.
This one is very visual.
Because it's quite sweet. Yeah. If you have just a pure cleaning mix without much chacruna, you can taste it. It's really bitter. It's much worse.
Oh wow, yeah. This one, so that's a difference, because on this mix I had the most visual experience in my whole stay here. You as well?
No, not yet, because I only had a little amount, and it's for cleaning for me.
I see.
So my two ceremonies are for cleaning first, just to get me as clean as possible. Probably the next one will be. So these are the variations in the mix, which people don't realise when they come for their first time, No. But after a while, you do get to notice it when you probably. It depends on.
This one. Yeah.
Every shaman is different. They might, they might run it a bit differently. Yeah. But for the two, like at the temple, they'll do the first 2 ayahuasca ceremonies are for cleaning. Yeah. And the male shamans are singing really powerful icaros, and they really take you apart. And so everyone is vomiting really badly, for the first 2 nights to get really clean, maybe worse, maybe diarrhea and feeling terrible, nauseous, especially people with a lot of trauma. And then the third night will usually be they'll introduce a different mix. But remember, they're also singing an icaro into the bottle pre-ceremony. So this is having an effect on the ayahuasca as well. Yeah. For what the shamans have decided to, what they're trying to achieve for that particular group of people and their particular problems. So there's so many variables. And this is the other common misconception with people who have just done one ayahuasca ceremony retreat and gone, I want to be on YouTube. They just think it's like they've had a visual experience, but they don't know the way the differences in the mixes can occur. They don't appreciate the work of the maestra and the plant spirits. Because that's, to me, I think of it as 3/3. It's just easier. So ayahuasca is an important third of the component for allowing the link, and to allow the shamans to see what they need to see in ceremony for you, to see your spiritual state, and concentrate on what your intention makes a difference for what you're trying to, say, get out of that individual ceremony. So you've got the ayahuasca for finding the problems and the intelligent medicine. And then you've got the effect of the icaros from the shaman and which plant spirit they decide to link to sing to you at that moment. And that can also have an effect on the ayahuasca, because maybe you've experienced it when you think you might be just coming down and things are starting to fade, and maybe they sing another icaro and whoa, you go back up with crazy visuals again. So there's so many things that are possible with the way it works. So to me now, I see the shaman or the shamana with the plant spirits is over 60% of the work that gets done. But of course, and this is why in some cases you hear stories of people taking ayahuasca without a shaman, and nothing happens except they feel sick and have nausea. and someone in the jungle's taken their $100 for giving them ayahuasca they bought in the market from Berlin market, And that's what happened to the guy I met. A guy from the Czech Republic. He was a young guy, about 20, and he was on a jungle tour. And I was talking to him. I said, "Oh, did you come for ayahuasca?" He said, "No, we came for the jungle." He said, "But we did do it." And I said, "Oh, what? How was it?" And he said, "Oh, we just thought we'd try it, And we were on the jungle. Him and 4 friends. So there's 5 of them. They met a woman in the jungle, and they mentioned ayahuasca, and she said, "Yeah, I can give you ayahuasca." They didn't ask whether she was a shamana or anything. So she said $100 each. So she had $500 Gave them all ayahuasca. They all had 5 hours of just feeling sick, headache, and nothing happened. It's like, well, what a surprise. What did you think was going to happen? You just asked some stranger, because in Peru, someone will say, "Yeah, I'll give you some ayahuasca for $100 each, you idiot." And that's what happened to them. But the trouble with that is, if they go back and tell their friends, it gives ayahuasca a bad name. But it's minimal. Most people have done their research and they know what they're looking for, but they don't really know the details. And that's the biggest misconception for me, is they think it's all the drink. They think, oh, ayahuasca is the healing drink. We just take ayahuasca and it fixes the problem. And they completely don't think of the role of the shaman, and they certainly don't know about the plant spirits. Most people, or how important that is, and how powerful the component, and the whole aspect of spirituality for holding the space from cross-contamination between bad energy, between different people, as well as external dark forces in the Maloka. There's a lot going on, And the more you learn, the more mysterious it becomes. And
right. It's such a vast world. But especially the role of the shamans.
It doesn't work without the shaman.
No,
it is just a drink without the shaman that makes you feel ill. Probably.
You would never grasp the significance.
And here's the proof. Actually, I just thought of something else. One of our ceremonies, we had a couple, they were friends, a French couple, and they came and did one ceremony with us. So there was 4 of us and the shaman. And the second time they went, the girl wasn't feeling too good. She had a bad period. So she asked the shaman. The shaman said, "If it's a strong one, you better not do ayahuasca. If it's okay." And she had a migraine as well. But in that ceremony, she didn't take ayahuasca, but the shaman still sang her an Icaro to help the pain and the migraine with no ayahuasca. So there's the powers of the shaman and the power of the spirits. So
how did the lady feel after?
Yeah, she felt a bit. It just knocked her out. Actually, she was just lying on the bed and she just fell asleep. So that was good for her. But she didn't want the ayahuasca.
What she needed, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful.
So I've actually seen an Icaro being sung to somebody who doesn't take ayahuasca to heal them. And of course, the same thing applies with my friend who was a trained shaman when he went back to Mexico, because the shaman, I told you yesterday, I think, he sang him an Icaro, which I felt in my stomach, although it wasn't for me, but I could feel it. It was really strong. And then afterwards, he asked me, "How do you feel?" And I said, "Yeah, I feel okay." But I said, that last Icaro I won't mention his name, but it doesn't matter. He was in Mexico. And the shaman said that he connected to his student in Mexico, but he also connected to his shaman, who's an older guy at 71, and he connected to his ancestors. So this spiritual connectivity thing is...
How does it work?
Who knows? No scientist will ever be able to prove it, because it's not of this dimension. That's my view on it. Spiritual energy, like quantum, seems to be able to affect quantum matter at a distance. It's a similar process, I think. Something going on between dimensions with matter and energy. And they can influence... Obviously, they influence things in this dimension, because that's how the magic works, and people wouldn't be healed. But that's the proof. That's the only proof, the definitive proof, in my view, that there is.
I see. I think
the proof is in the results only, not the actual work, because you cannot prove the work, because no scientific instrument in this three-dimensional realm will be able to be built ever that can detect spiritual energy. Only the human pineal gland, when it's got DMT in it, seems to have that ability to be able to make the connection and go across different dimensions.
I see. I think, maybe it's unrational that I'm saying this, but I think it also has to do with the belief system, right? And just to give like a very, very like simple example, when your shaman connects to his shaman in Mexico, right? He connects to the energy of it, right? So let's put yourself in a situation and you spend a lot of time with a person, right? And you come across a problem and you think something like, how would this person do it, right? Then you're like quantuming your mind into the other person, right? So there's the connection.
Yeah.
And maybe this belief system is just like the surface that you're scratching of how the shamans connect.
Well, one of the main belief systems now coming out is why I said to you about read the book by Amit Goswami, because he's written a book called The Conscious Aware Universe. So his theory and belief for many people is that consciousness itself is a fundamental of the universe. We are part of that consciousness as we're born into the human body. Yeah. So it's consciousness experience itself, but consciousness actually has the ability to affect matter. So it's consciousness that has created everything else.
Yeah. And that's the problem in our Western way of thinking about the body. We think that we have like a biomechanical system that gain consciousness somewhere, but science it's the other way around.
Science is very good, but science works by cutting everything down to its individual components and understanding the components of every simple rules from all the components to be able to make something complex when they're all put together. So, and it does work very well, because else we wouldn't have electronics and engineering and aeroplanes and whatever. But they're all made of smaller components that are put together to make something much more complex. And they view the human body as the same thing, and the brain. These type of the hardcore rational scientists.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously people who have come from a more spiritual tradition realize there's something more, because the proof is in the result. Yeah. The proof isn't in the experiment, because it's not possible to make measurements from the experiment, like I was just saying. You know, the ceremonies work in a very, very different ways, very different with the way each shaman works, depends on their culture. There's so many different ways the healing works. But at the core, the same principle, which they all believe, is there's some kind of spiritual entity, just for the sake of giving it a name, but nobody really knows what it is. Different beliefs say, some cultures believe everything has a spirit, but everything has spiritual energy, I'm pretty convinced.
But still there must
spiritual energy passes through everything, and I believe it's a fundamental for life itself.
But there must be a correlation between them, because otherwise they wouldn't be writing the DMT dialogues, right?
Yeah.
People are encountering the same
well, this is the new cutting
entities.
edge. Yeah. People are, there are scientists now that are starting to look at different types of hallucinogenic drugs and just loosely categorize the experiences of different people, which can be very different, but there are similarities too, if you take enough people. And one of these is the DMT entities, which is where, there's a particular class that seems to pop up more than often, like the grey aliens. They're not aliens, they're greys. They are in the spirit world. Too many people have seen them when they've been on hallucinogenics, like ayahuasca or mescaline or DMT or whatever, LSD. They see the grey aliens. This is where I think it's got mixed up in the culture. Like they're aliens, like in this dimension. No, it seems they're not. And then there's like metallic insecty ones. So there's like different categories, but I think they're different dimensions personally. Yeah. Because in my experience, I think I went to the realm of the ancestors.
When you are in ceremony, you are entering different dimensions.
Yeah, and you don't have any control over that.
No,
obviously, unless you're a shaman. The shaman seems to be controlling it, but where you can go. I only went there once in my first ceremony, 3 times in the first ceremony, but I've never been there again. Yeah. That place where I saw the African tribal guys.
Oh, right, yeah.
And that was when it was sort of clarified months later when the shaman told me he was connecting to his ancestors. So there's some cultures call it the realm of the ancestors. Yeah. So it's like a particular spiritual plane. Yeah. So it seems like there's layers of different levels of energy that are different dimensions. That's the way I'm starting to see it now, really. But over and above all of it, there seems to be a universal consciousness or whatever it is. You could call it God, you could call it Mama Ayahuasca. It's just a name, because nobody really knows.
No.
Because it's not possible to know in the human form. It's never going to be possible to actually know. You can know in yourself with what you believe, but as far as like a scientific definition, nobody can say, yes, God exists or doesn't exist.
No, but I do believe that when you are like in the ceremonial space, for example, you get familiar with certain energies that you encounter, right? And you can build relationships with these energies. And you can utilize some of this energy into your own life. But like you say, to grasp the full concept of the beings that you are working with or encountering in your ceremonial space.
And that also depends on the individual, because you have that ability. I don't. You see, I don't have any of these abilities to see. I have a rational mind for me to understand
stuff. Even though in space, there are still...
But
I saw it with you.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So different people resonate. This is why different people can see ghosts. Different people have different spiritual gifts, like being able to heal with their hands, or Reiki and all the other things that are regarded as spiritual in the realm of the spiritual world, because they're not provable by science, but they work. And like belief
that's what
is
I
the core
wanted to say
thing.
to you, that even if you don't see it,
It's still there.
It's still there. It's still working for you. Right?
Yeah, I mean, Amber Lyon said she could almost feel the Dr. Cito's in her brain, like working away, like fizzing away in her brain when she was on. But I've never had anything like that, because I've been so preoccupied with being ill, because of being so ill in my life. I just have the physical symptoms of being really sick and really in pain or suffering. To get that purged. It's like this San Pedro today is working in a strange way. I've actually got butterflies and nervousness in my gut for the last hour. But the San Pedro is making it kind of handleable, but I can feel it. It's really strong. Normally, if I was straight, that would be really upsetting. That would be a horrible space for me.
I see, and this is the NLP that comes in, right?
Yeah, well, I haven't been talking. So this is keeping my mind off it, but it's really strong, like butterflies. Loads of anxiety here in my gut. So hopefully by when it wears off, at the end of today, that will be another major chunk of San Pedro. Yeah,
so now,
has taken out for me.
Exactly. And it's also like they did these researches with top athletes, right? And these people are performing on a super high level. So the scientists thought okay, we should see how they handle stress, right? So what they discovered is that the top athletes, they would experience a sensation of stress as excitement.
Yes. Right? Psychopaths do as well. That's why they don't have any fear.
It's different. Yeah, it's different, but
similar.
Yeah, I do see why you make the link exactly. But now you have this sensation in your stomach, and you call it anxiety, right? And but also aware that San Pedro what Chuma has there right now. You also say that you have the butterflies in your stomach, right? Try to find a different way to relate to this physical sensation, because the physical sensation is attached to a narrative, and it's the narrative that's a judgment attached to the narrative that's harmful for you.
But that's the problem with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah. All of the triggers are subconscious, and that's why you cannot attach them, because you don't know what the trigger was, and this is why it's arbitrary and it can hit you at any time. Yes, there are normally triggers, like even a thought. Something just like something that you remember that frightened you, or something that happens that it gives you a shock, or just nothing at all. Sometimes it just happens, and that's why it's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It's such a horrible thing, because you don't have any control about it, and it can hit you at any time when you're least expecting it for no apparent reason. So this is why it's difficult. But that's what seems to be how ayahuasca and other psychological techniques like hypnotherapy or neurolinguistic programming seem to work in the same way. They have methods of, and ayahuasca does the same in visions, it seems. In my experience, I've kind of worked that out through dietas and thinking a lot about how these things can work with my sort of reasonable knowledge of psychology in terms of narcissistic personality disorder and complex post-traumatic stress.
So humble, reasonable.
Well, it's a big field. And there's all sorts of other illnesses like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia and all sorts of other shit. But I only know my area that affected me, because obviously that's in my interest to know about it, and it affects most other people more than anything else, because trauma is the main problem in society now. In fact, the world. Forms of trauma that cause post-traumatic stress disorder. Whether it's wars, both for soldiers or for children that are caught up in it, that create narcissistic personality disorders as a self-defense mechanism in the first place.
But you said that the Aya would...
But Aya seems to have a similar way where it creates a narrative, if you like, or usually in the form of a vision. And it can be anything. It doesn't necessarily mean it's real. It's just a way for your conscious mind to visualize this problem. Because when it's in the conscious mind, it seems to then allow it to come from the unconscious mind, be dealt with in a conscious fashion, but allow the overwriting of the memory that causes it, the memory pathways in the brain. And Amit Goswami talks about these thought pathways in his book, which is why it's a really good book to read. Because it's only by overwriting the subconscious memories to stop them being triggered as whatever pathway they are, that they cause the trigger, to overwrite them with something more positive. And ayahuasca seems to do that.
It does.
Well, it obviously does that, because this is why it heals trauma so well. And having it brought to the conscious mind, which I now know from my experience of obviously drinking at Christmas and breaking the magic, it's still in there. Ayahuasca, like all of the other psychological techniques, cannot remove the problem because it's your past. So the only way around it is the integration process, where it causes an acceptance of your past and all the problems and all the things, because they've created your journey up to this point in your life has created you, the person as you are now. So you cannot remove it because it's part of you. It created you. So I now see it, as I explained the other night, like a Pandora's box. And all of this shit gets put in the Pandora's box, and the magic of ayahuasca seals that box so that it never comes out again. Unless you do something stupid and you go completely back to your old ways, whatever they were, you go back to the same people, you don't change your diet, you go back to your eating shit, and especially drinking lots of alcohol, or go back to those, part of your problem, which is either escapism from trauma through drink, drugs, sex, shopping, all of the things that are addictive characteristics of people trying to escape from their pain. But as Dr. Mate describes it, addiction in any form has particular traits that are fixed, and they are an attempt by the individual who's suffering to get short-term relief from that suffering by any means that's natural for them or how they feel. Like it can be shopping or attention seeking, like him. He was a doctor who was traumatized himself through the war. So he's a bit of a shopaholic, but he also needed to feel important as a doctor. He got a thrill out the beeper going off because he's always wanted, from a child who was never wanted as a baby or was abandoned, effectively with no father. He's now somebody important, and that sense of being wanted in society was his kind of relief. So these short-term escapisms from...
That's what opens the box.
It's they create detrimental patterns of behaviour. They try to escape through alcohol, whatever it is, because it's a short-term fix to the immediate pain. But the remedy itself has long-term detrimental problems, because obviously alcoholism kills people and it rips your body. It's a short-term fix to forget the pain, but the next day you feel like shit. Or if you keep drinking, you will end up in a state like I was in Mankara. With a full body shakes, you haven't eaten for 3 days, so you're absolutely trashing your system. And then the insight I got from my first ceremony here the other night was an explanation of how that can work in spiritual terms, which is it makes alcohol or any toxins.
And that's what I noticed within these ceremonies as well. Like, I had the explanation of the pineal glands. But it's only because I've been reading a book as well that's talking about it. So I was already familiar with the concepts. And the Aya shows
really
it.
Explains it in a really simple, much more clearer fashion.
It integrates it in the body. It integrates it in your cells. You can have it in your rational mind, but then suddenly there's a knowing behind it, right? And that's such a profound way of learning.
I had the same thing with the book by Amit Goswami when he was explaining the collapse of the wave function of a quantum particle to an actual particle. from where it becomes a wave, and then that then fixes something in this dimension in the real world, and an event happens. And because I'd read that chapter during the day, that ceremony that night, that was my conversation as well. I had the explanation, and everything was like, yes, now you can see how that's the quantum wave collapsing. Steve, Mum was telling me, she's saying that's the quantum wave collapsing to create that thought process, which then has a direct effect on your actions and creates the event in the real world. Yeah, but in a much more simplistic way. And I get it.
Yeah, exactly. But it also shows you the other side. It also shows you the stuff that you've been feeding your brain with, which is bullshit.
Yes.
Because I had some visions as well where I saw like these stupid demons from horror movies that I saw like ages ago. I was like, oh my god, what is this thing doing here?
Yeah,
right?
Because they're still part of that fear-based subconscious mind.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's kind of partially destroying your ego.
Yeah. So it's like taking already the information that's in your brain.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it opens up a whole new realm of visuals where you can learn things. You encounter these beings, and they interact with you. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. I love the world, you know. I mean, in a way, I suppose, because of my addictive nature from the past. Until I got to a point of healing, possibly where I am now. I was still a bit low, feeling low, depressed. I didn't really want to be in this world. I just wanted to just stay in the Aya world. And I'm thinking that's almost like you try to turn it into an addictive drug, Steve, you know. Yeah. But now it's not. It's different because it's a journey. It's a healing process, and it can take a long time.
That's the thing as well. That it's not just taking a drink. It's the whole lifestyle attached. To it while you're here.
Well, there's another saying,
and it's the integration.
Yeah. They say ayahuasca will only work to its optimal if you meet her halfway afterwards. So you have to do the work too. You can't just sit back, I've had my ayahuasca now, I'm clean, I'm good, and then go back and think you're going to be... Because if you go back to your old ways of being, the thought patterns that were created before will reform again because you're in the same environment, so the same things will happen and they'll create the growth again. And it will overwrite the new one that the ayahuasca's written for you. But you need to change your environment, you need to change your friends, you need to change your circumstances, and especially a change of diet, and stick to it. And that's really difficult. Because for most people, they have to go back to their job or their family. And they feel great at first, but slowly they'll fall back into their own ways. They have to go back to the same job. This is why, we're lucky in some respects. Because I would never have been able to heal to the degree if I didn't have the house money and I don't have to work. Because I'm not fit to work. It's as simple as that. At the moment, I'm not fit to work. I can't, because work is actually a trigger for me. Because of what I explained about the 5 traits. Conscientious, neurotic. It's the worst character. It's out of all the character traits that are possible when you do this test. A conscientious neurotic is the worst type of person to have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because they're going to be murdered by it. Because they want to do well, but the act of doing well and trying to please people and do a good job of everything, be really conscientious about everything, with the complex post-traumatic stress, means you automatically have a failure mentality, that if you don't succeed properly, you're going to fail. And of course it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And therefore you become nervous, and then when you're nervous you can't function right, because your memory doesn't work, you can't concentrate, and therefore you don't do your job well. So you've actually you've hijacked yourself. So you're stuck in a horrible vicious circle that you can't escape from.
So what are you learning from this path that you took now concerning your conditions?
It changes after each ceremony, no doubt, or each circumstance, because you've been healed a little bit more, so therefore your perspective changes. Because at any one point in your life, you're only a sum total of all your previous experiences plus your present belief system at the time. Correct? Makes sense?
Yeah.
And your belief system and your current state of being, healthy or not healthy, will determine your perception of your reality at that moment. Whether, things are going bad for me, everything's shit at the moment, or actually things are pretty good and I'm feeling great. So it's and this is the thing in one of the books I read, is people who don't embrace change become ill. that was one of those little nuggets in one of the little books that I was reading last night. That was another one.
Yeah.
That said about God created a cure for every illness. It's just a question of whether you can find it or not. But that was another one about what I just said.
Well, this is definitely a medicine.
Yeah. So it's people who don't embrace change, because that's an insecurity fear. If you want stability in your life, you're insecure. Because the path of treading the line between yin and yang is 1 foot in chaos and 1 foot in order. You need a healthy dose of both to be productive and have an interesting life. Otherwise, if it's too secure, you get bored and you stagnate. If it's too chaotic, you end up with traumatic stress and inability to it's just, you can't put an anchor down anywhere. Everything's just chaos, and then nothing works. And this is the line between the two. It's a healthy balance of both. You have to have both, and you have to keep moving, because it is constant change. Everything is constant change. So if you have any, and I always have had an insecurity of change. I just want to be quiet and just be left alone and sit. The world, don't bother me. Just leave me alone. But then that's also a very boring life, because you're not fulfilling your potential.
You're putting yourself in a prison.
And you're putting So that's really apparent to me after reading that. That's been working in my subconscious, where just you have to get over the fear, or just be able to accept that every day is going to be different. Things are going to come along, and that's what keeps life exciting, because you don't know what's going to happen. And if you have a positive attitude, it should be good, because there's another law of magic. Like attracts like. So a positive mindset should attract positive things. A negative mindset will attract negative things.
Yeah, that's what we talked about yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Yesterday, when you were right.
But of course, there's the other saying as well, because I collect these sayings. Because
the changing of energy, that's one of the most important things. And that's why when you're like in this environment here, where you're doing the ayahuasca ceremonies, you're completely open.
Yeah.
Right? So you're also more... what's the word for it? Like receptive to the information that you're putting into your body right now.
Yeah.
Right? That's why I also explained to you about the elevated emotions. Like if you can, like in your meditation, get in a state of appreciation, of gratitude.
Yeah.
For example, for a place or a situation that happens in your life, or a person that's in your life, and you just stay with this feeling. And when the feeling is secured in your system, take away the image, take away the narrative that's attached to the feeling, and just stay with this feeling. Then, when you go in ceremony, the ayahuasca will show you how this works.
Okay.
And that's what happened for me. I was practicing these elevated states of emotions, and I thought, I think I'm doing it right, but I'm not sure. I'll still stick with it. And then I went into ceremony, and after ceremony, and during ceremony, the ayahuasca showed me really clear, okay, this is what joy feels like, this is what love feels like, this is what gratitude feels like. And it was like a download, right? And it downloaded this consciousness in my system that right now I can invoke these emotions. And it's these emotions that put you in a higher frequency, that put you in an energy. And it's these emotions that attract events into your life that are
beneficial rather than catastrophic.
Exactly, because you would much rather have a nice conversation with someone who is happy and who is loving than someone who is being mean and grumpy, right?
Yeah, because it's negative energy and it attracts and it feeds.
Yeah.
And negative energy feeds off the light of somebody else.
Yeah, and same goes for business collaborations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Different.
Okay. So yes, but just to finish that off, because it's an important line for people who are thinking about doing ayahuasca, especially who. There's a line in the film The Matrix which came to mind at one point, and my friend's really into. He knew the Matrix films, and this is the thing about people who talk about being spiritual in some form, whatever that means to them, because that's definable on a personal level, actually. Because because we can't say what it is; it's what it is for every individual and how they perceive it. And there's the line from The Matrix: "There's knowing the path and walking the path." And they are completely different things.
Yeah.
And it's the only way is experience of spirituality is to experience it by doing something that puts you in the right environment actively.
Thank you, Steve.
Ayahuasca is exactly that. You cannot explain ayahuasca in its entirety because language doesn't exist to describe what can happen to you.
No, right? Yeah.
So the only way you're going to have it is have your own personal experience with it, and it will be like nothing anybody else has ever had. Same as it is for every individual.
Exactly. Man, what a beautiful conversation. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
I heard a good explanation about it.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right, it's lunchtime.
Recording. Wow, this was.
Wow.
This is almost a podcast.
Maybe like a podcast.
Yeah,
maybe 1 hour.
this is a podcast. Yeah.